was in 1996. It was not that big. Takma died in 94, and he died in March. That was the middle of the dry season. So the first year after he died, 95, we had a small gathering. The second year, we had a little bigger gathering. But by 1997, the GAIAP grew, and we had a lot of schools coming in. And the purpose of the GAIAP was to lend a hand. Everybody come, help cut fire breaks, share information, clean up the community, clean up the river, and so on, and stand guard for dry season. And today, the GAIAP is like a flagship project. Over 500 visitors would come in. We'd go to other communities and share the concept and so on. But again, that started in 97. We got registered in 2000. So from 1985, 1983, 84, 85 to 2000, we worked without any funding, but we continue to do. Not until 2000 we got our first grant from community development. So again, it's like showing people that as long as you have the passion and the willingness and the love and appreciation for what you want to do, you can get it done. So sometimes you might start the project and say, I cannot do this without money. You know, it was not about money when we started the project. It was about understanding the problem, understanding, you know, what was causing the problem in the community, why people had to leave the land during the dry season, who was setting the fires, why the river would be polluted, why people would come and dump, and so on. And we developed that, you know, team. We created a team to defend our community from the degradation that was coming in. And today, as we go along, you'll hear more and more. But I must say, we have reached out from our first funding with community development in 2000. I have a list of donors. As I go along, I'll share. And it's just, it took one NGO, one donor to sponsor you and to highlight you and, you know, to, as they would say the word, big you up. And then from there, others start buying in. Other state agencies, private sector, business communities, embassies, and so on. People just start, you know, seeing the value in the work, and they started to support Fonsuman. And today, I must say, the project is a project that not just in Trinidad, but I've shared the story and shared the model throughout the Caribbean and even throughout the world, different parts of the world. I've visited over 22 countries around the world sharing this information. So again, I want to say, Fonsuman, we continue to grow, and our growth is not really on funding alone, but the passion and the willingness to continue to protect, appreciate, and love our natural environment.
Okay, Esther.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, hold my mic.
I'm Esther from Nature Seekers. Well, I know a few of you may already know a bit about Nature Seekers. Let me just give you a brief recap. Nature Seekers began primarily for the protection of the leatherback turtles on the Matura Beach. That happened in 1990, and it was really a collaboration between the Forestry Division, who then didn't have the resources, you know, to deal with that national problem of leatherbacks being slaughtered on the Matura Beach. And they approached the community of Matura to, as the persons involved in the slaughtering, because it was done as a livelihood method then, you know, the turtles were being sold for their meat and for their eggs, and also to feed the families in the community. So when the Forestry Division approached the Matura community, it was really to get buy-in from the community to solve this problem of slaughtering. And there were a few passionate and committed persons that began the organization then. And it really developed and enhanced since then to include the entire community in terms of protection of this natural resource. And, you know, our first funding in Nature Seekers came in 2012, which was 12 years after the organization began. And a lot of experience in terms of, you know, protection of natural resources, and also in terms of engaging the community, social development, was garnered through the 12 years that allowed us to, you know, go after our first grant funding, which was the Green Fund. And one of the things we learned from this is that Nature Seekers may be seen as a big NGO, but the amount of passion and experience that was garnered over that 12 years is what has really allowed the organization to really envelope and develop into what it is today and allow it to expand. And also the passion, because volunteerism is one of the core foundations of Nature Seekers even today. So the community really understands that putting out and protecting what is yours, that ownership experience, is what is really important for Nature Seekers and the community of Matura, and that is what has allowed all our projects that we have engaged in so far to be successful, because the community is the focal point that was engaged in each of the projects. Because it wasn't just something that was done on Nature Seekers as an organization, but it was Matura as a whole that took part in the protection of the natural resource and also to ensure sustainable livelihoods for the members of the community.
Okay. Thank you, Esther. Kava.
Good afternoon, everyone. Carver Bacchus from Sustain TNT. I think that Sustain TNT is probably the youngest organization up here. We started in 2011, and a short 6 years ago. It feels like much shorter than 6 years, to be honest. One interesting thing about Sustain TNT is we don't actually have a physical space that we protect or conserve per se. We're not a community-based organization. Sustain TNT, as you can tell from the name, is really about sustainability education within the context of the country of Trinidad and Tobago. So that's an advantage and a disadvantage, I suppose. But in terms of the genesis of Sustain TNT, I could tell you a little bit about that. I went to film school in 2007 in the UK. And during my time in the UK, the issue of climate change was becoming very prevalent. It was something that was in the news. It was something that, in fact, people would stop you on the street to talk about. These people who stop and ask for donations for different organizations. They want to educate you about this issue or that issue. Climate change was one of those hot button issues that you could not avoid, even walking down the street. And when moving back to Trinidad in 2009, I found that, well, first of all, nobody was talking about climate change, right? Nobody really even understood what it was, it seemed to me. And that was a major concern. That was a worry, Because how could these people all the way over in England, right, a developed country, far away, not an island, but, not really considered an island, be talking about this as a major issue that would impact their economy, that would impact their environmental space, that would impact the health of their people. And we in Trinidad and Tobago going along as business as usual, but we live on an island, so I found it alarming. And so that was really where the initial incentive to create an entity or create a platform for environmental education started. In fact, another organization that I still work with, called Pop Creative Services, that's really focused on marketing and communications. That entity started Sustain TNT as a platform for its corporate social responsibility worldview. And so the very first Sustain TNT activity or event or whatever was under the Pop Creative Services brand, and it was a business seminar, green business seminar, green lifestyles workshop, and film screening, right? That's basically what we had. It was like a weekend of activities, and this was supposed to sort of demonstrate our capacity to do events and to educate the public and to design and produce all these different things. But coming out of that weekend, the response was so overwhelming that we were like, okay, well, I think this might have to be its own thing. This might have to be its own entity, might have to be its own institution. And that's where Sustain TNT really found its footing, so to speak. So for people who don't really know much about Sustain TNT, we are environmental education, but our main focus is communication and behavior change, right? Communication and behavior change. And the platform that we develop that we've developed is Green Screen. And some people might have heard of Green Screen, the Environmental Film Festival. So Sustain TNT produces films for educational purposes, and we exhibit films also for educational purposes, obviously, right? So Green Screen now is actually in its 7th year. We just ended about 2 weeks ago with our 7th edition, and I think by now Green Screen has screened films, done workshops, done seminars to probably about 4,000 people, including high school kids, over 7 years. So that is probably the project that would get the most visibility, that would look the most sustainable from the outside, and is obviously the most amount of work for us. But as Akila said, and basically the other panelists have said, I mean, this is really about passion, you know, more than anything. That if you don't really have a passion for what you're doing, or the space that you're interested in, you know, in short order, your entity, your organization, your institution, and you as an individual will eventually run out of steam. I know that, you know, the discussion is, you know, is about funding, and it's about, you know, how to access grants, and we all need money. We all need money to do what we have to do. But, you know, grant funds fluctuate. They go up, they go down, you know. We didn't have as much funding this year as we've had in years gone by, you know, the economic situation and all of these different things. But yet Green Screen still happened, right? And again, from the outside looking in, it probably looked just the same as any other year. It might have looked bigger. We had just as many people. In fact, we had more people than any other year, right? So we had to find clever ways of spending that money and stretching that dollar and ensuring that we get value every time. So, you know, it's really about, that's really what it's about. It's about using the resources available to you to do what you need to do. It could be $1, it could be $100,000. You still have to figure out the most sensible way, the most dollar value focused way to get your objectives met. I think that is what I would say for now. I have no sense of how long I've been speaking, but I feel like I've been speaking forever.
Probably about 5 minutes. But we have a timekeeper, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so clearly coming out from all of you is the why. Pat, your community was suffering from the indiscriminate quarrying. Akila.
Yes. Can I may I expand a little bit on that? Because I really wasn't quite sure how much to say. But Maracas Valley has serious problems in that it has a quarry. It had a very rapidly expanding building construction, the estates were being cut up and the hills were being cut to put in houses. And if you clear the hills to put in houses, then the natural result is landslides, silt in the river. Quarry produces silt in the river. Trees block the river. Water, Maracas Valley is a watershed area. When I first moved in, it was an exporter of water. Recently, they're now having to find ways of importing water so that the residents of Maracas Valley can have water. We had water. We now never get water during the day. When we moved into Maracas Valley in the 1980s, we had a 24-hour-a-day supply of water. Now we don't get water during the day. We can go for 1 to 2 weeks without water because we're slightly up a hill. If you look at a river and you see non-functioning sewage treatment plants and the raw sewage going straight into the river, and you think of people maybe trying to wet their crops with water from the river, and you recommend that people don't bathe in water from the river because the results of the pollution survey in the river at one point was as if 3,150 people had dumped raw sewage into the river. You don't want to bathe in that, right?
Yes.
So those are the sort of results that we came up with. So lack of water, reduction in water supply. We have a one in, one out, narrow road, trucks thundering by, dust flying, road being
Damaged.
eroded all the time. It's not a pretty sight, but we're working on it, we're trying. Quarry best practices would mean that we don't get the pollution in the river. Building best practices could be implemented, which would cut that as well. I don't know. What does one do?
Well, it's clear that everybody has their why, and you're very passionate about your why, very passionate. Akila, you had your why. Esther, same thing. Kava, same thing, and it all stem because this morning we talked about knowing the reasons behind the projects that you get involved in, because that is the thing that's going to keep you going. You know, if you're very, as Kava said, funding based, if your mindset is only about money, very often very soon you'll find once your steam burns out, you don't want to pursue this thing anymore. So it's very important that you really have a heart for what you're doing. You know, so it's clear that you all have your why. But what I wanted to ask is, how exactly did you communicate that why to the grant funders? How did they know that your project was different? Because it's interesting, because sustainability is unlike these organizations, right? You have no physical location. It's a more modern concept, because these organizations were developed in the 80s and 90s, but now we see there's a digitization of things happening. There's a new way to educate people as opposed to just going in and talking. Now you're doing film distribution, you're online. So it's obvious that it's not just these types of projects that get funding. Even the more modern or unconventional ones get funding. So tell us a little bit about what you felt was your unique selling proposition to the organizations that would have given you funding.
Okay, maybe I could, since you used us as an example in your spiel there, I'll just, I think you also said it. I mean, I think our approach is one where we're very organized. We're very happy to use technology. We're very results focused. All our proposals that we develop, the results would be, the desired results would be very clear. I think that we also have internal capacity for, things like graphic design and all of these things that, that we can actually package a proposal or package a communication, whether it's for a grant or for sponsorship or for something else like that, some organizations may not take the time to do. So I suppose we put a lot of effort in the branding of the work and the branding of the projects that we develop, so that, I mean, like it or not, grant agencies and people who might fund your project, they're interested in not only supporting something good, but they're also interested in being seen to support something that's good, right? So you have to show them those opportunities, and you have to show that you understand that that's important to them. And I think that that's something that we've managed to get right.
I think.
Okay, for us at Fonsaman, being situated in a very, very important watershed and close to the city, I think the attention was really on us, especially during the dry season. Right. And being able to prove that we can transform a space that was once deemed as a fire climax zone, even though it's under the control at some time by forestry division or environmental agencies and so on, they all failed. Because it was a trend. Year after year, the hills would be on fire. A very important watershed, and then you'd find a domino effect. After fires, floods. Yeah. So then for us, being able to stop that, being able to plant over 70,000 seedlings on that hill, being able to bring back forest cover, being able to stop forest fires to a certain level where, we can show since 1997 almost 200 out of the 350-acre block that we manage has been free of fires. You can come in and see the trees and measure, you know, it's not like just saying this on paper, but if a forester or an environmentalist or geographer come in, they can see signs, you know, and say, yes, this area, you know, remained untouched for years. And this is what we have done over the years. And not just addressing environmental issues, but social issues as well. Because the forest and people goes hand in hand. You can't say you come to protect a forest and drive away at the end of the day. You know, the first responders, the ones responsible, the ones, you know, you got to stop the trend. And this is what we have worked hard to do at Fonseman. And not just keeping the information in Fonseman, but taking it outside of Fonseman as well. So again, showing donors, well, yeah, we are real. And then getting several awards as well. Hummingbird Gold, BP Award, several EMA awards, Swim Call Awards. So the list goes on, and that too encourage donors that they're safe to invest in us. Okay.
What about you, Esther?
Well, for Nature Seekers, I just want to correct myself. I said 12 years earlier before we got our first donor funding. It's actually 22 years. So I think donors recognize the success of the organization without external help, and the experience that was garnered throughout those years in environmental sustainability, conservation, you know, and social development, and that allowed donors to really allow themselves to invest in our organization. One of the things that was key in all of the projects that we implement is that most projects you would see a strong environmental focus or a strong social focus. But we managed to combine the two and create a balance in each of the projects that we implement. Because as my dear colleague here from Fonseman said, you can't have the environment without people. You know, we work hand in hand to occupy the same space, and people need to conserve the environment where we get our resources from. And so it was developing projects that allowed for conservation and sustainability of the environment, but that also the human element of livelihoods in the community. Because as was said in the previous panel session, the Northeast Coast is really an impoverished group of communities. And having sustainable livelihoods is one of the key goals that can motivate a lot of persons in the area. So before you tell me, protect this tree or protect this turtle, what can I benefit, or how could it help me and my family live at the end of the day? It's basically down to that. So all our projects are to also show that by conserving the environment, you also conserve yourself and your family. And that was the key selling point in our projects. And also we garnered for continuity in terms that we had a strong youth leadership focus in our projects, where we brought training, capacity building, awareness sessions to the youth of the community and allow them to be more environmentally sensitive, more environmentally aware, and also financially aware, so that they too can build that type of capacity to carry on in NGOs in the future and also to continue protecting their community.
Oh, fantastic. Anything to add, Pat?
Sorry, do you want?
Yeah, you can add. What made the Maracas Valley Action Committee, what was the USP for this organization to receive funding? What do you think made it stand out to the grant funders?
I think it was the sheer, it was the number of issues that were involved, and I think that was what kind of made the project. The fact that it was so many, we were suffering from so many different types of problems, so many issues were involved. We had the land clearance, which caused the flooding. We had the loss of water. It was just, I think it was just the sheer number of issues that we had to deal with. The only thing we didn't have was a dump. We could have had, I suppose we could have had a landfill as well, but that's about the only thing that was missing. And if you see, we went with photographs of fish dying because they're just trying to survive in silt. That's not a nice thing. So you see the effects on the wildlife. We were dealing with forest fires as well, but not so much. We were dealing with the overall. It wasn't just one small area, it was the whole of Maracas Valley. And I think that was it. They understood that there was a need for data. And data is one of the most difficult things to collect sometimes in this country. So we had to go out and collect our own data, basically. And this is what the first project was really data gathering. We did road traffic counts, we did water quality tests, we've looked at quarry best practices. We understand just how a quarry can operate in this country, and it can operate without doing very much damage. It doesn't need many checks and balances, it just needs checks and balances. And I think that was what sold the project to them, was the number of issues and the number of challenges that were involved.
All right.
Can I just add one thing more?
Sure.
Yes. I think the media too played a really, really powerful role in attracting donors to our project, because the media would come in and often tell our stories.
Okay.
Because it used to be like real issues, and by the media, be it Caribbean Beat magazines or our news or whatever, they would take the stories out, and then donors would come in, be it local donors or companies from outside.
So
yeah.
publicity also kind of got you the jump start that you needed to be seen by the right eyes, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So now that you have kind of told us what made these projects special, what is some of the advice you would give to our audience members in terms of what they should be thinking about when they are putting their projects together?
I would like to start by saying, based on the area that you're working with, or even if it's not an area, like in Sustained TNT's case, the issue that you would like to deal with, it's always best to start with what is most comfortable with you. What you have acquired experience or knowledge in, or you have persons who have that knowledge and experience with. Always start with your comfort zone, and usually you know a lot more than you think. A lot of people think when, they go after donor funding that they don't have the capacity to, actually write the proposal or do the application properly. But, when you really get down into the crux of the matter, especially something that you're comfortable with and something that you have been working with for years, and I know most groups here would have been working with various issues, be it environmental or social, for years, you would realize that you can really develop real projects that could have real impact.
For me, I would like to let you know that it is very important to do an assessment of your organization or your community and try to identify real needs. You might hear an organization doing, I can call it a list of things that I've done over the years, but you go back and assess in your space, in your community, what the real needs are, where your focal areas are, where the demand for funding, is. And then you also look at the donor. The donor will have certain needs and demands as well, and their focal area as well. So you will not ask them for something that they are not willing to give, but then again, you don't take something that you don't really need and bring into your community. So you need to buy into from your community, doing that assessment, because when the resources come into the community, comes into the community, and you start to grow, it's the community you're bringing it for, right? So you're not bringing a foreign package that they don't understand. Then they might say, we didn't ask you for that. So you have to really identify what are the needs in your community or your organization, and then, really sit down and get the buy-in too. Sometimes 2-3 people sit in the room and say, okay, we're going to do this and call it community-based project. It has nothing to do with the community, no input from the community. So again, the input from the community will always help, and then you look at what the donors' needs as well, and then merge both, and then you will come up with something that for sure, when you put it on the table of the donors, then they will surely, appreciate it and have no reason to say no to you. Yeah.
Kava, Renat?
Okay, yeah, I'll go first. On this issue, I just want to say that all donors are not the same. All donors don't have the same expectations of you as a grantee. They're all different. They all want different things, and it's important for you guys to have a sense of what that is before you actually apply and are successful. And next thing you know, you're signing a contract and you are connected to this entity by the hip for however long your proposal or project, is meant to run, right? So have a sense of who the grant making agency really is for, what they're about, what they're really trying to achieve, what all the reporting is like, everything. Because you could find yourself very easily drowning in paperwork, drowning in expectations that you really can't deliver, and before you start properly, you're dead in the water. So take your time and do your research. Talk to the grant-making agencies before, get a sense of what the expectations are, and make sure when you apply and you're successful, they could actually, implement the project successfully. I mean, the Jeff project is probably one of the best-known projects. I mean, we've been a recipient of the Jeff, so, I could give that a stamp of approval in terms of the level of support that you get. Unfortunately, I haven't worked with Digicel or BP within the context of a grant, so I can't speak to them. But I can definitely tell you that the program that Rissa runs, I guess Rissa's gone, but the program that she runs is very well run, it's very well administrated, and through the course of implementing a Jeff grant, any organization actually grows. You have the opportunity to learn, you have the opportunity to grow. So I can give Jeff my stamp of approval, right? But watch who you approach for funds.
I want to say Fonsuman was one of the first organization or community-based organization to have received the Green Fund, and we were like the guinea pigs, a guinea pig to them, because it was like, even when in the proposal, we would, use certain environmental terms and so on, and they did not even understand. And they would question you and make you feel like, hey, you're doing something bad. And then because they were not like foresters on board and so on at the executing unit of the Green Fund, and I was feeling like, hey, this is really difficult. At times you'd say, I will never go after Green Fund funding again. And then after they were able to understand, like, they learn to build capacity, same way they tell you to build capacity, they learn to build, they build capacity off of, I would say, for someone with the terms and so on. When we start talking contour drains and check dams and this and mattock, they write on a note, what is a mattock? And I'm saying like, hell, So sometimes you meet these things, right? But then again, after that, the relationship just got better and better as we started to comply, and we just had to say, okay, let's just answer all the questions, no matter how small. Sometimes you say, why would they ask us that? But at the same time, you get to, just start to comply and just deliver, and then eventually the relationship was really nice. But at the beginning, it was like, I would never apply for Green Fund funding again. But I think in there, they learned to work with, the communities and build capacity. Same way we as a community organization, we built capacity to, give them a good report and to deliver what was expected of us. Yeah.
I would just like to kind of give a little bit more about Maracas Valley. It's a group of communities, about 8 communities within Maracas Valley, who do not communicate with each other. The communication is really done by MVAC. They do talk to MVAC, whereas they don't talk to each other. So therefore we became a communication tool between the various, because what happens at one end of the valley affects what happens at the other end of the valley. So they'll come to us or we go to them. I think the main thing is listen to what people have to say. People on the ground are inclined to be ignored because they say they don't know. They do know. They know a lot more than many of the professionals. They understand more. They know their environment. They know their communities, and they know what's needed. What we just have to do is to try to make sure they get it.
I just want to add one thing, and you don't necessarily have to have technical experience, to go after any grant funding, because no one from Nature Seekers before we went after our first grants, or many of the others after, have gone to any university or school to get any technical expertise in proposal writing, or how to go after grants. But as I said before, because you are familiar with the project and because you are familiar with the work that you're doing, then it's just to take the idea from what you already know and put it on paper. And we have worked with 3 of the 4 grantees that spoke. We've worked with Digital Foundation, with Jeff SGP, and also with Green Fund. And I can safely say that they're all really welcoming and helping in terms of helping you along the process of application and even through the implementation of your project. No question is too hard for them to answer. Any clarification is given once you ask, and it goes two-way. They also ask if they're unclear with anything. So at the end of the day, you really build a project that could be successful upon implementation, and also to the benefit of the community or whatever area you're implementing it in.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so at this point, we'll stick a pin and we will open the floor for questions. So I'm sure there's a question or two on the floor. Don't be afraid to ask.
My name is Vera Edwards. I represent the Toko Foundation, but I also work at Radio Toko, and I know how important communication is. I have been listening to the panelists, and especially Maracas Valley, and I feel your pain, because we are faced with something similar in Toko. Now, what is happening is that people know what is happening, they know what the problems are, but nobody is willing to come forward and fight. So, as an organization, sometimes you have to take the bull by the horn and run. And then you get criticism and nobody's talking to you, and this one is not talking to that one. So you have to find a sort of a mediation. And I understand what you are saying. And I understand what all of you are saying. You know, it is not, and one of the things I always love for people to say to people, yes, you're sitting there and you're saying, yes, it's okay, and you know what you're doing, and it's hard work. A lot of hard work. Sometimes, yes, you have the passion, but when you begin to get the kick and the boot and the bong, sometimes you feel like throwing your hands in the air and giving up. Sure. You know, it's not easy. That's what you're dealing with, right? And so I understand, and I say congratulations to all of you, and to Sustain TNT. We would love to work with you because we are into communication, and we would love to get your information to share with our community, because I think it is important. We live in a coastal area, you know, and it is important for us to be able to share that kind of information with our community.
Now, we've always been interested in the work of the Toko Foundation and Radio Toko, so I'd be happy to share our contact information after.
Okay, so we only have time for one more question. Who wants to take it? Anybody? One more question. Okay. If that's the case, I'll just... Okay.
Like how long, I know this might really, how long does it take by the time you give in an application and then you get, back and forth, and then maybe the project actually starts? Because I know for the Green Fund, it's an extremely long process, but is it a quicker process for another funding agency, or,
Green Fund is probably the longest.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is on, but hello? Yeah. Yeah, the Green Fund is probably the longest, as you said. I think Jeff works on a cycle, and it's quite organized. So if you apply for Jeff in, whatever month, January or whatever, you're going to get a response by a particular date. And then based on the time that you propose your project to start, which more than likely would be in the next period, the next quarter or whatever, it all runs fairly smoothly once it's approved, because they run on a cycle. So you're approved in one cycle and you start your project basically in the next cycle. Green Fund is different, and I can't speak to Digicel or BP, but in terms of a regular funding cycle, I think Jeff is the best example.
For Green Fund, though, I know there is a new advisory committee that has recently been set up. So to give you a gauge as to how efficient or how fast the cycle will work this time, it's really fairly new, and there have only been a few projects that have been implemented. But it's, yeah, before it was really a long process. But we hope that with this new committee who is, going through projects, it's really, it's a lot faster.
I think funding from state agencies are always a bit of a challenge because, for example, like budget time, there will be a delay, and change of ministers or something, there will always be a delay. So you just got to prepare for that, and that is where you have to be strong, you have to be, resilient, you have to have other projects within your project to sustain you and not totally depend on one. That is when you talk about sustainable projects, meaning, yes, you apply for funding, but there must be something else that can sustain you, whether it's ecotourism, whether it's your plant nursery, whether it's your lectures, whether it's something to generate revenue while you wait on money to buy ink to do a report from the same donor, right? So that is, but then from the energy sector, private sector, I find they all, for example, we were funded by BG for 5 years, and there was no problem. You get your term money, the rest is there, and then you give them a report, and then they give you a second phase, half in the dry, half in the rainy, and they keep that rhythm as long as you can deliver, your reports and site visits, and they're happy with it. But yeah, so for me, I never depend on the state funding as my main donors.
Once our application to Jeff stopped going into their trash box, it went through fairly quickly. But our first series of application landed up in what was then Richard Ledu's trash box. And he said, but you didn't send the application. And I said, yes, I did. And I was sent a. But after that, it went through, after he actually received it, it went through relatively quickly.
And I think they really try to meet the deadline that you give in terms of your start date for your project. They really try to facilitate that. Only if there's some unforeseen circumstance, or in the case of a government ministry like Green Fund, if they don't have the funding at the point in time to disburse to you, that may be the major holdback. But most grantors really try to stick with your start date.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Came to mind.
You're getting the mic, so go ahead.
Yeah. How did you come up to for stopping the fires itself? How was that? How did that happen?
Okay, well, it's all about education, and teamwork. So Takuma worked with Forestry Division, so he got to understand how to do fire breaks and so on. And then I was trained with CIDERA, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Unit, and in that, that training package too, we understood like what to do. And so during the dry season, we'd cut off fire breaks, we'll have our patrols out, we will be monitoring and just on the readiness. The readiness is all about being ready. Don't even wait on the fire service department. Don't wait on EMA or NEMA or nobody. Mobilize the community. Get them ready. Get your project ready. Get your site ready, because the fire setters are right or wrong. Turn your fire setter into a firefighter. It's all about transforming lives and getting the people involved, because it starts in your community. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think this panel was really, really good. I think the information shared, I think everybody could benefit from it. If nobody else is inspired, I was.
I'd just like to mention. I really would like to mention the patience with which Jeff dealt with our most recent project. They were really very patient, very understanding, and very supportive. And I think I would go to Jeff again. The only trouble is, when you're in a voluntary organisation, you spend a lot of your time, most of your effort then goes to following the project, the terms and conditions of the project, and you're inclined to lose your touch with your community, which is a serious problem. So this is something that voluntary organisations have to be aware of. Okay?
Okay. So, sustainability, communication, revenue generation, whether it's in cash or in other forms, and keep your passion burning. Community involvement, because at the end of the day, people need to be able to live before they can put themselves into other projects. So thank you very, very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think